Here's a quick look into today's episode.
I've always tried to anchor everything we do in the Army to those fundamentals. And while tactics can evolve a little bit, techniques will evolve and change. Technology certainly will evolve and change, but the fundamental things that as soldiers do, the blocking and tackling, it's largely the same sort of stuff. This disciplined execution of our drills, the competence in our doctrine, so that we can then adjust as conditions and variables change. First Brigade, the Spartan Brigade, has the 6 senior military colleges: Texas A&M, Virginia Tech, VMI, the Citadel, Norwich University, and the University of North Georgia. And then it has our nation's 4 military junior colleges, which are extremely unique: Georgia Military College, Marion Military Institute, New Mexico Military Institute, and Valley Forge Military College. And the thing that makes those schools unique is that they are 2-year commissioning programs. It's really important that we create experiences for our cadets that show them they can keep up with the very best in the world. Being in the Army isn't this far off thing that they're not ready for. I'm hopeful they come back and they're like, I get it. And I'm fired up to go join that organization.
Welcome to another episode of Teach Me to Fish, where our purpose is to help leaders better understand what drives people. In today's world, the core of recruiting and retaining talent revolves around leadership. And not just average leadership, but motivated, values-based, inspirational leadership. Our purpose is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories and stacking habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. And the biggest reason I wanted to do this with you today was that I'm super interested in the things that are happening with ROTC, happening in your life, where you came from growing up, why the Army, all that stuff. I think it's important for people to hear that. With all your experience in all these years, I really want to hear what are some of these cadets? How are they coming out of school? I want to learn about the senior military colleges a little bit more. What's ROTC up to these days? And so
For sure.
that's the biggest things I want to get out of this thing today.
Hey, I'm ready to go. I'm prepared to go in any direction, buddy. I enjoy doing this stuff, and I'm excited. This will be fun.
Yeah.
I appreciate you asking.
I'm super lucky to have you because, we've served in the same units several times, and we've served with a ton of the same people throughout our careers. Yep. And there's those people in your life and in your career that when their name comes up, they just you just smile. You see somebody and they're like, "Hey, who are you going to talk to next?" And I say "Oh, I'm talking to Jason Wayne," and they just go, "Oh, that's going to be a good one," and so that's what people what I see when people when they hear your name or they hear me say your name. What do you hope people think or feel when they hear your name?
So it was funny when I was reading the roadmap of this thing. That question forced me to stop and pause. And I guess what I hope I'm remembered as when they hear my name is a guy that was a pretty decent paratrooper that loved the Army and loved soldiers. Honestly, man, I love this profession. And the thing I love the most about it are the human beings in it. I really do sincerely hope that I'm remembered as someone that left the organization a better place than they found it. And so I guess the theme of the things that, as you kind of prompted me on this, was the things that I've always sort of run together that tie to doing that have always been this idea of developing leaders and building cohesive teams and then just pushing them to be the very best they can be. And so I hope that's what I'm remembered for, but if nothing else, I hope they know I'm a pretty decent paratrooper that loved the Army and loved his soldiers.
Yeah. I can tell you that's what people think, and that's the facial expressions I get, and that's kind of the tone of people's voice when they hear your name and when your name comes up in conversation, all the time. What kind of pushed you at a younger age towards the Army in the first place?
So I'm an Army brat. People always ask "Hey, where'd you grow up?" I grew up in the Army. My dad was a Charlie 175 Ranger Mountain RI, NCO, got out in the 70s as a staff sergeant. I from the earliest age, there was a picture sitting in my parents, in our living room of my parents' wedding. And if you remember Lowers in the Mountain Phase of Ranger School, there's a little waterfall
Yeah.
off to the left of that, right?
Yes.
My parents got married right there, like on that
Wow.
ledge. And I always remember, I mean, even if you flash forward to Ranger School, I remember seeing that as I was rappelling down the rocks and pausing and looking left. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the picture. That's where my mom and dad got married. And here I am in this weird like place of Ranger School. And then next thing I know, I get snapped back to reality where some RI is like, hey Ranger, get off my wall, that kind of thing. But like from my very youngest memories have been being around the Army. And then my dad got out of the Army, became a Department of the Army civilian. So I went from going to like infantry places to like weird depots and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I've just always been around it, and it's always been a path that it just sort of called to me.
Yeah.
I loved the idea of what being a soldier in the Army was, and I always thought my dad and his friends were people that I wanted to aspire to be like. So I think from the earliest age, it was really my dad kind of pushing me in that. Oh, not him. He never pushed me in that direction, but certainly his way of behaving and those around him, that was something that I was always drawn to.
Yeah.
It was really funny is, for the longest time, I was dead set on enlisting in the Army. Like I was going I was going to be an enlisted soldier. I was going to go right in my dad's footsteps. And my dad was the one that actually was like, no, 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 I'm going to force you to go to college. Every parent wants something, that they perceive as better for their kid. And so that was my dad's view. And we actually had like this, I was this sort of rebellious teenager in high school. And I was like, well, hey, I'm going to enlist. And he's like, no, how about you apply to West Point instead? I was like, there's no way I'm getting into West Point. Like, no, there's no way I'm getting into West Point. So it was almost on a joke. I was like, I'll apply. And, this sort of thing kept evolving where I kept going through every consecutive gate to get in. And next thing I know, like he wins the bet. like, next thing you know, here we are. We're going to West Point, and he's just smiling, like, "Told you."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, here we go. We're on the path."
Yeah.
But like he was that, and then I was always an athlete in high school, so I played a lot of team sports, things like that, and I always loved the idea of being on a team. Like I don't think I was ever the best athlete on my team, but I always loved the power of a group of people coming together to make something that is just great. Like
Yeah.
this ability where you can bring people of varying skills and everything, but like when you do hard things together and you practice and you put yourself in situations where you get 1% better every day, over time, you create this organization that just does really, really well. And I got to be part of some really great teams in high school. I mean, I played football, soccer, basketball, baseball, and I got to be part of these great teams and these coaches that pushed you. And I always saw the Army as a place that was very similar.
Yeah.
I knew I was never going to be a professional athlete. I was like, maybe I can go do this instead. And it's a similar sort of mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, I love listening to everybody's story is slightly different, and the interactions that they had. I can't believe you said your dad grew up in Charlie Company 175, because that's exactly the company
Yep.
that I grew up in as a private, and then later on
Yep.
got to command. But the everybody that your life sounds like my children, like the kids that
Right.
they watched me and my friends, and now, my son, and now my daughter at West Point herself, and I feel like they've seen that life, and they said, I want to go try that for a little while. What was your experience like at West Point once you showed up there?
I think the appropriate phrase, and this was actually something that got communicated to me pretty early on, is every day is a test, right?
Yeah.
Every day, and everything, like everything is a test. whether it's academics, physical fitness, mental toughness, just to deal with the overwhelming load that you deal with there. It was interesting. Like going to West Point was probably the best thing that could ever happen to me because I think coming out of high school, I thought I was pretty good at school, sports. Like I was pretty good. Like I did well in my high schools, in my regions.
Uh-huh.
I had done I had done well, right? And very quickly that I got replaced by this idea of we,
Mm,
because I was no longer good enough to excel at West Point without other people lifting me up.
that
Like
makes
they
sense.
got hammered home very, very fast that I was not equipped to succeed, and it took me about a year and a half to almost 2 years before I finally like felt some semblance of stability there, because I felt like I was always reactive and on my heels, and I had to learn how to ask people for help. I had to learn how to humble myself to the overwhelming environment that I was in, and then I would look left and right and I would see people that were just amazing,
Yeah.
and I felt woefully inadequate, and I just felt like I needed to find good people to help lift me up. And so I was lucky though. I mean, I had these great cadets that were mentors there, guys that we all probably know, like the John Gibsons of the world, the Quay Barnetts of the world, these guys that are just these exceptionally talented humans, but they they were invested in those below them, those subordinates, and they showed me what good leadership looked like, and how you could reach down and engage with your subordinates, do hard things with them, and then set a role model what what right looked like. And so I had guys like that around me that took the time to pull me in, and it just made West Point this place where I felt like I was constantly evolving. It
Uh-huh.
was great. I honestly look at West Point as one of the best experiences I could have ever had, and probably was the right place for me at that time.
Yeah.
I am unsure I would have done as well in a regular college environment for sure.
Yeah. How now that I'm asking you to skip forward a little bit, but like the things that you're doing now, and you've seen so many different universities and the senior military colleges, and now brigade commander of having a bunch of universities. How much different is it than ROTC, or what is so much of the same?
So, it's really cool coming full circle. I see what I'm doing now as full circle. I've been blessed to go to school at West Point. I got to teach at West Point, and now I get to, on the back end of my career, look at um, our other commissioning sources through Army ROTC. And I think Army ROTC has these tremendously talented young people that are choosing to serve. And in many of the same ways, they're just like every cadet that goes to West Point. And I think my unique position as the commander for First Brigade, where I am in charge of all of the senior military colleges and military junior colleges, it's this really cool intersection of the sort of the traditional ROTC program with a West Point style academy like experience, where if you're at the Citadel or you're at VMI, you are committing yourself to do something not necessarily harder, but certainly putting yourself into an environment where the rigor and challenge of academics, military lifestyle, discipline, a core of cadets environment, where you subordinate yourself to that organization and its policies and things like that. Um, it's very similar to West Point, and they're all different. I have 6 senior military colleges. Each one has some similarities to West Point,
Hmm.
and each one also is wildly different in terms of culture and traditions and things like that. But I think the thing that they're unified on, which I love, is character. It's they are all unified on developing leaders of character for our Army. And you see it. Like, I go to our schools as often as I can, and I'm continuously impressed by the level of commitment to something greater than themselves, and this effort to like develop and grow into a leader that we would aspire to replicate.
Yeah.
It's really really cool. And so from the ROTC perspective, it's just really really neat seeing that approach to it. It is different. It's different from the perspective of slightly different in terms of resources. For our regular RTC kids, uh, uh, they're full time college students, you know, and they do this in addition to being full time college students, having jobs, in some cases having families,
Yeah.
right? And so like you see kids in the National Guard, you see Green to Gold, so you see like the flavor of the entire Army and our civilian populace all in this ecosystem where they're trying to grow and develop and ultimately commission. And so I think it's a really, really great cross section of the Army that helps fill our officer corps with a representative sample of what our nation looks like, which is pretty great.
Yeah. The way you kind of described that, it sounds a lot to me like you know what you're looking for, right? You've been a part of some great units. You've been in the Army for a while. You went to the academy. And so you kind of know what to pick up on and what to look for and what trends that are positive and which trends culture, which trends character. If they're off, that is going to be a significant, departure from what is expected. When you left the academy and you went off to the Army, what was your first couple of years like in the Army? Like how did those first couple of years go? What was the most important thing? And how was your first experience at your first unit?
For sure. So I'm going to back up because my departure from West Point was actually delayed by about 9 months. Um, excuse me. My departure was delayed by about 9 months because about 3 weeks before I graduated, I tore my ACL. And so I was super excited. I got infantry. I got my number one choice going to Fort Campbell for my first assignment with the 101st, and I was so psyched. And then I watched all of that sort of start to crumble with this catastrophic injury to my knee, and I had to spend 9 months at West Point recouping, rehabbing, and getting myself ready to go. And in the process, the Army rolls along with everything,
Yeah.
and I lost my assignment. It went needs of the Army,
Mm.
and I had when they came down with my next assignment, it was needs of the Army, and I was going to NTC. And for a guy that was as excited as he was to go to Fort Campbell, that was a little bit of blow, to you, and more importantly, it was a blow to my soon to be wife, Carrie, who she had already mentally, prepared for the move to Fort Campbell, and she calls me on the phone. It's like, hey, what's in Fort Irwin, California? And so like having that dialogue with a soon to be new Army spouse was a challenge. And it's interesting because I had the same conversation with a young cadet just last week. He called me. We did a little OPD. He's future infantry officer, and he was frustrated with his assignment of choice, or the assignment he got. And we had this conversation about, it was very much about him, and we had to steer that away from him and steer it towards, well, we need good leaders in every organization, and there's a
Hmm.
positive to every unit that's out there. The opportunity to grow as a young officer at a CTC is is exponential relative to your peers at a different organization. And if you're serving to make the organization better, if you're serving to make your unit better, you have such an opportunity if you look at it from that
Yeah.
perspective, vice a different way. And that I told, I was like, look, I had people at West Point. That's what I got sat down and told, because I was a sad lieutenant, And I had leaders at West Point that sat me down like, hey man, you need to shape up. Like go do great things wherever you're planted, and the Army will work itself out. Um, it was it was hard for 9 months. I had to get myself healthy again and get myself ready to go. But luckily enough, I was able to get back down to Fort Benning and go through Ranger School, do all the things, and got on my way. And you know, as that whole thing happened, you probably remember back in the day, it was easy to flip flop assignments.
Yeah.
I ended up graduating Ranger School, and then my branch rep was right there, and he's like, Wayne, you know, you're Ranger qualified. I need you now to go back to Fort Campbell. So they actually changed my assignment at graduation
At Ranger School
because I got
graduation, back to Fort Campbell.
they changed it back to Fort Campbell there, and it was just sort of a thing where it was a random. I was all mindset ready to go to
Yep.
NTC, and then it was a random thing. They moved me back, and I showed up to Fort Campbell 3.5 months before OIF1 kicked off.
So what
And
year was
so
that? 02?
it would have been the end of '02. Yep.
Yeah. End of 02. Yeah, I commissioned in December of 02.
Yep.
December of 02. Right about the
That's
same
right.
time. And that was the same time where, if people had to give Ranger School a second chance, or if they were unsuccessful, some of the units that they were heading to, they got swapped out. And
Yep.
and I remember my time in the 173rd when I was Battalion XO. There was half of the people, if they were not successful at Ranger School, they would go and talk to their branch manager and say, I no longer want to go to the 173rd, and I should go to another unit. And we would have to flip them with somebody who was successful at Ranger School, or somebody that was maybe prior service that had a bunch of jumps, and we could get them into Jump Master School and then get them out to the
Yep.
173rd so they could contribute the day they got off the plane, right?
Yep. And that was, I mean, so it was sort of I was sort of in the wilderness for a while, having to deal with that. It ultimately ended up going back to what I wanted to do. But I think the main point of my story was just, you know, you deal with a little bit of adversity, but it's not about you. It's about where the Army needs you to serve, and going where you're called. Um, luck for me, I was very blessed though. I got to go to Fort Campbell. I got to go to the 3rd of the 502nd, so Strike Brigade, Widowmakers, and served under Colonel Anderson. General Petraeus was the division commander. Served under Lieutenant Colonel Alahua. Had Xavier Brunson was a Battalion XO. Brian Pearl was the Battalion S3. The
Wow.
Jason Davises of the world. Were all people that were in my first companies.
Yeah.
It was this place that I went where everyone was scary good, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone. And while the officers were good, the NCOs were unbelievable. Like you just showed up and they were just so ready, which for me as a new guy coming in 3 months before a deployment to Iraq, that was helpful. Like that was amazingly helpful for me to show up there and just be surrounded by this talent pool that gave me something to look up to, but also something to chase. And I feel like if there's like a story for me in the Army, it's that I've always been surrounded by people that I wanted to chase.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, who are you trying to be like? Well, shoot, I just need to look left and right. And there are human beings that are so amazing at everything they do that I just want to try to be a little bit more like them every day. And I just was so lucky in this first assignment to have these leaders who then executed this brilliant large scale combat operation, when we went into that country and fought our way north. It was just this tremendously impactful time of my life where I got to see what the Army truly was capable of at scale.
Yeah.
And then obviously after that, we went up to Mosul. We were in Mosul for the rest of our time there. So for that rest of that year of 2003, and it was a time of transition where the Army was in transition, where this sort of counterinsurgency thing started up and really started to build up steam. We started fighting these very small fights at the platoon and below, company and below, was the nature of the game, and it was just this real huge turning point for the Army. But I always reflected on that time because the things that made us successful during large scale combat operations translated right to the things that made you successful in counterinsurgency operations. Competency in your small unit drills, your warrior tasks, disciplined execution of the operations process, all that stuff made you successful, and just the environment just changed. The conditions just changed, but the way you operated as an organization didn't need to fundamentally change that much. And so that was pretty cool to be able to be part of that for that year of transition for the Army.
Yeah. I like how you said in a year of transition for the Army, because, there are some folks right now with the transition in contact and so much that's happening in the Army, and they think it's so unique. They say this is such a unique time, and this is so, the Army's changing at a rate that is different than ever before. But we've been changing our whole career, right? Every
Yep.
3 to 5 years, you've got to change a little bit. You've got to modify a little bit. You go into a deployment expecting one thing, and you have to quickly modify because you're on a different piece of terrain against a different type of enemy, expected to do a different type of mission, right? But the basics are the things that you relied back on, right? And you said, if we prepare for large scale combat operations, no matter what they throw at us, we're gonna be more prepared, right?
That's exactly right. And that's honestly the thing that I've always tried to anchor everything we do in the Army to those fundamentals. And while tactics can evolve a little bit, um, techniques will evolve and change. Technology certainly will evolve and change, but the fundamental things that we as soldiers do, the blocking and tackling, um, it really is the same. I mean, it's largely the same sort of stuff. It's this disciplined execution of our drills. It's the competence in our doctrine, uh, so that we can then adjust as conditions and variables change. And I thought that my time in the 173rd, my time in the 101st, really every unit I've been in, the best units were the ones that were anchored in the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they were good at the basics, they could adapt. They could adapt to the environment. The environment was easy to adapt to. Well, it was never easy, but certainly it
Right,
was it
right.
was it was not a huge mental leap to adjust. But when you had organizations that weren't competent in those fundamentals, yeah, it was really hard to adapt to like a different way of thinking
Yep.
because you didn't have an anchor point to adjust.
Yeah. You said a couple of the units that you were a part of in that, 10 years, right? So there's a 10-year window right there. There's a lot of things in your career. You've got a long, amazing career where you served in some great units, the 101st and the 173rd and the 82nd Airborne, right? Just to say a couple that are out there. When you go back to some of those basics, like what are the things, like you went back to them? Did you kind of relearn those things? Was it easy for you to just jump right back into some of those fundamentals? Or what was it that attracted you to the same type of units over and over and over?
Um, so it was interesting. You kind of go where the Army tells you, and I think when I look at my career, I've just been sort of lucky to be in the right places at the right times. Again, I got lucky going to the 101st when I did. I just happened to graduate Ranger School, and the guy that was going there lost his slot, and that's how I got back there.
Mm-hmm.
I could have very well served my first 2 years in Fort Irwin, and I'm sure would have been around amazing leaders there too. Um, when I left Fort Campbell, though, the thing that I realized was not every one of my peers had had a similar experience in the Army. They didn't see the Army in the same way I saw it. Like I heard a lot of people were really frustrated with some of their leaders and how things had gone. And I had a hard time. Like I really couldn't contribute to some of those conversations because I was just surrounded by people that I thought were just tremendous,
Yep.
values based, high standards. They just pushed you. And that always drew me in. And so then when I left the captain's career course I was actually on assignment to CR, right? I was supposed to go to Germany, and I remember flying. I flew over ahead of my family, and as I was landing, we used to have this thing called First Perscom in Europe, and that was sort of the HRC of Europe. And when I signed in, they landed in Frankfurt, and the reception company got me. They actually handed me new orders, and they're saying, "Hey, you're being diverted to Heidelberg, and you're going to go to U.S. Army Europe G3 in Heidelberg." And as a new captain, again, leaving the captain's career course, I was like, "Okay, what brigade combat team
Yeah.
is in Heidelberg?" And they were like, "There isn't one." And I'm like, "Oh no, this is bad. This isn't what I want to do." And but again, I go down there and I sign in, and there's a retired armor officer who was my boss in the G3, a guy named Rick Soriano. He was a battalion commander, had been a brigade DCO, and he sat me down. And he's like, "Look, I know this is not where you need to be." He's like, "I'm going to fight to get you out of here as fast as I can, but you need to like dig in here and be the best you can be for the organization." And so that's what I did. I said, "Okay, here I'm doing this thing here," and I got to go as part of that job. I got to plan CTC rotations for every unit in Europe. So I got to go down to JMRC and spend time there planning that out and seeing that side of the Army, seeing the big picture. And then 6 months into it, he's like, "Hey, the 173rd is getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan. I'm going to link you up with their DCO and their battalion XO, brigade XO. I want you to call them and see what they say." And so I called Mike Lose, and he was the brigade XO. And then he's like, it was a simple thing of a, "Hey, sir, I'm a captain in the headquarters up here at USER. I'd love to come be a part of the 173rd." And he said, send me your ORB and all that stuff." And then he hangs up the phone. We were on the phone for maybe 7 minutes. And then I get a call back from Colonel Johnson, who was the DCO at the time, and he does an interview with me. He hangs up. He calls two of my old battalion commanders, figures out if I'm worth hiring or not, and then he calls me back and he's like, "Hey, Wayne, check it out. We're going down to JMRC for our pre-deployment, rotation mission readiness exercise. I'm not hiring you, but we're going to give you an opportunity to audition." And
Nice.
so Rick Soriano is like, "Hey, I'll put you on TDY." He puts me on TDY for 3.5 weeks. I go down to Hohenfels, and then for the next 3.5 weeks, I worked for Mike Lose and Jack Rich down in the 173rd, and executed that rotation. And when it was over, they pulled me in the office. They're like, "Hey, if you want a job, it's your job." And
Wow.
that was
Nice.
that was all she wrote. And so I went home from that deployment or from that exercise. I told my wife, like, "Honey, I think we get assigned to Italy." And you got pictures. My wife's in Germany. We haven't been in Germany for more than a year yet, so the Army won't PCS us. So she has to stay in Germany while I go down to the 173rd in Italy and then deploy for 15 months with them, during OEF 7/8. So this was kind of height of things getting wild in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really, really tough deployment for everybody. And, I think it's probably one of the formative memories of my life is having to spend that 15 months with leaders going through, I would say, one of the most mentally and spiritually straining environments you could possibly be put in, and then families having to deal with the same thing back at home. And I think that was really the first time in my life where it really, really hit home, the need to have, when you say developing teams, it's got to include the families too. The family has to be part of that team to make the organization sustain during those sorts of really tough environments where you may not communicate often, and when the phone rings, you may not be happy. It may be a really, really bad thing that comes through, and how to endure through that sort of stuff. So it was a challenging time, but I mean, we got to that unit, and it was again, same story. You had the Matt McFarlands of the world. You had the Bill Lawsons of the world. You had this tremendous group of NCOs. I love the story of Sergeant Major Vamoto, right? Who lost his son, within the first couple of weeks of that deployment. And I was standing next to him in the talk when it happened. And, you know, he left the deployment and he came back 4 months later and finished that deployment with us, because we were his team and he wasn't going to leave his organization behind. That was the type of leader that existed at
Yeah.
every level, from the fire team up to the brigade headquarters. And it was just this tremendously formative time for me. I mean, and then my peers, again, I think it's a theme for me, as I'm always trying to be like those guys around me. You had the Chris Hammonds of the world, the Dan Kearneys of the world, the John Gibsons of the world again,
Yeah.
Alan Kehoe, Pete Lazinski, like all these humans that are just the who's who of brigade commanders. Those are all my peers during this time period. And it was just this really, really awesome experience, emotionally challenging, but like a place where the organization pushed you to be better. And when you gave it everything you had, it made you and everybody around you better. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah. What an amazing story. Just like I'm just trying to kind of soak up a little bit of those times, because a lot of those names, I know those people and I know those experiences. And those were some gut-wrenching times. You know, do you think that it would be similar nowadays? I'm asking you to kind of speculate, like the quality of people that we had, right? I feel like we have that same quality. It was the environment, it was the necessity to be that way. It was the mission. It was everybody was centered around accomplishing these toughest of tasks, on behalf of not just their unit, but of what our country was asking of them. And I think a lot of folks nowadays, they would be prepared to do the same, and they would grow in a same way. What do you think about that?
I think that we were tremendously lucky to have a density of talent at that organization, but I think that talent exists everywhere in the Army and in our nation, right? We have every one of our ROTC programs, every one of our senior military colleges, our military junior colleges, West Point, and every one of our nation's academies. We have the next Chris Hammonds. We have the next, Pete Lazinski. We have the next Ryan Worthen, like the Bill Austins, the world, the Matt McFarland. Like they're there right now.
Mm-hmm.
And
I agree.
and I see them. I've seen it at every level of my career, whether I was a major in 425 up in Alaska, whether I was a battalion commander in 1505 in an 82nd, or going back to the 173rd as a DCO. Every one of those experiences, I've been reassured that the leaders that we want on our worst day, they're there right now.
Yeah. And
when pushed to do so, they're going to rise to the challenge. And I think the thing that's most reassuring, I'm listing off a bunch of officers right now, but again, the anchor point of this is our NCO Corps for sure. And when I think of like the Steve Valines of the world, the Andy Moores of the world, the Chris Lawsons, the Jack Whites, the folks, the Sal Giuntas of the world, we're talking Medal of Honor winners, Distinguished Service Cross winners. They exist in every unit we have in the Army. And the reality is they're just normal people. Just like I, I've learned long ago that there's not much special about me, and I think if you asked any one of those leaders I've listed, none of them would say there's anything special about them. It's they have just had this series of iterative experiences over time that equip them on the worst day to rise to that challenge. And we talk about leader development. That's what I'm so happy about coming full circle, is I get the opportunity to hopefully be a small part of creating those iterative experiences over time that build the competence, build the character, and build the caring for our humans that when put in these hard situations, our soldiers are prepared to rise to that challenge. Our leaders are prepared to rise to that challenge. And I've never been disappointed, man. Honestly, I've never ever been disappointed.
Yeah. I love how you described that, right? Because we've all been a part, we've had people in our career that'll talk about, the good old days, or they'll bring up, back in the day, right? And, you know, and I lived through the same things. They said the same things to me. I was the Nintendo generation, I'm not as tough as everybody else, uh, going forward. But I believe it's in the youngest and the newest of our profession, right? From the enlisted soldiers that are coming in today to the junior officers that are just starting to become a part of our organization. And now they have somebody like you who believes it, right? Believes in them, believes in what we're doing, and believes that when their time comes, they will be prepared, right? But this next area I want to go into is like, how are you kind of pushing that out to your professors of military science and your assistant professors of military science and all of the universities that you go in? It's no mistake. I see the pictures of you out there doing PT with everybody. I see you at cadet summer training, that you're out there, you're leading people, you're pushing, you're showing them down the right path, you're empowering them, both the NCOs and the officers, through all those things. Start off with when you first went out to ROTC, when you first, found out about going to be Spartan 6, what was going through your mind, and what were you kind of, what were you looking forward to the most kind of going into it at the beginning?
Yeah. Um, it, so it was my I am so passionate about developing leaders. Like it's what I focused on when I was teaching at West Point. When I got to do some research there, it's what I focused on. It was really the jumping off point. You had prompted me before about social media a little bit, and how I got started doing that. Well, that really started all the way back when I was a lieutenant, right? I was hungry to learn and grow and look for opportunities. And I got involved in the company command and platoon leader forums that were being run out of West Point. And then I got hired by those guys to come in and run those forums with Tony Burgess and Pete Kilner and those guys at West Point that ran that. So I got to do that, and I got to see how the power of bringing the profession together digitally could raise the bar for everyone. And so, even pre Instagram, pre Facebook, even that was something that we were already starting to do through various forums and whatnot. And so for me, it was a natural jumping off point in battalion command to start doing that. And then coming into ROTC to kind of answer your question, I knew I wanted to do the exact same things that I'd done in every other unit I wanted to do, I had been a part of. Like I wanted to build cohesive teams. I wanted to train and educate our leaders, build ready, competent, and resilient leaders that are prepared to win the crucible of ground combat, right? And we want to make our army better, right? Like that's something we owe our army. And so I thought a lot about how do we commission officers that you, I, and every citizen wants leading their sons and daughters, right? Like that's really important. That's a really powerful thought is, we want to commission people that have the character and the competence to lead, with integrity and rise to that challenge so that our young people, our most valuable resource in our army, our children, are led the right way. And so how do I do that? And so when it came to like how I was going to communicate and focus, social media became an anchor point there, which is what you see. It's like, look, how do I role model this? But really coming in, it was this opportunity to, I think, simplify. I think that was my focus coming is how do I simplify leader development for these young people that see what I think is a very complicated. The Army, I feel right now, is a little bit complicated in how it communicates. Like we talk about transition and contact, we talk about large scale combat operations. You look across the globe and the complexity of the operational environment can feel overwhelming, right? Whether you're talking about, Indo-PACOM region, or you're talking about what's going on in the Ukraine, or you talk about the challenges that we see in the Middle East or anywhere else, it feels like there's so much to focus on that you lose sight of really what matters. And so when I saw I had the opportunity to come in to ROTC and really impact about 700 officers a year, I've got about 4,000 cadets total enrolled in First Brigade programs. Um, I think I was really trying to like find ways to simplify what it means to be an Army leader,
Mm-hmm.
so that they didn't get distracted by variables that are important to the Army, but maybe aren't important right at this second to your development as a leader, right? Of what's
Yeah.
important when you commission, and if I had to put you in a platoon right now, some of that stuff you can learn later on, like the technical stuff you can learn, the political science piece of it you can learn, but the fundamentals of leading sergeants and soldiers and thinking about how to apply elements of combat power and the tools of the profession, it's relatively simple. And so that was my focus coming in, was let's divest
Mm.
ourselves of the complex, and let's just worry about the most important things, which in my opinion, that is character, that is competence in our warrior tasks and drills, that is competence in the professional ethic. And it's really about how do we care about our soldiers, and treat each other like a family, treat each other like we would die for each other.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we may have to do that, right? That may be what we have to do. And so that was the anchor point coming in, was how do we weave that together? And the challenge of it is I have the tyranny of geography against me, right? I have 10 programs and I'm headquartered at Fort Knox. And so it really became, how do I communicate this and build buy-in across my organization into it? And so that was a lot of work up front with my PMSs, with my chief MSIs, and with my cadet leadership, to like communicate why this was important and how we were going to get after it. And I think that's been fun. I mean, it's been a lot of
Yeah.
fun trying to play with that.
Yeah. Some people's ROTC experiences, like in my case, I got to see it as a major, and I got to see what you're seeing, like how are we building future officers of character. Then I went out as a field grade and then became a battalion commander. So I knew what we were producing when they showed up to our organizations as second lieutenants, right? What you got
Right.
to see was, as a battalion, you got to be a battalion commander in 1P, right? And you were seeing all these second lieutenants, what they came in, what they were good at, how good was their character, how competent were they, and you had to take them to the next level. You had to get that even more competent, the technical, the tactical stuff, right? Then you went, I believe, then your next thing was to be the deputy commander, right, out of the 173rd. So again,
Yep.
you're seeing the lieutenants, but you're probably interacting more with the captains and the majors and the field grades that are out there. So you got to see all the way from lieutenant to these majors as a battalion commander and as a DCO, what there were, maybe what was missing, what was lacking, what was strong coming out of all the different academies. Because you were seeing West Point folks, you were seeing senior military colleges, you were seeing ROTC middle of nowhere universities, that were coming to your organizations. And you said, I wanted to simplify things for them. How did your experiences as a battalion commander and DCO then help you with simplifying things?
For sure. As a battalion commander, the thing that made 1P so special was its culture. And when we talk about building cohesive teams, what we're really talking about is building culture, right? And culture is the sum total of experiences repeated over time, which builds this sort of set of underlying assumptions that it intersects everything that the organization does, and culture will always endure. So when we talk about my time in 1505. You know, we spent a lot of our time focusing on the blocking and tackling of combat, but also, I mean, we had a little phrase, we called it competitions and cookouts. It was real simple, right? Competitions and cookouts, right? That was our key to building cohesive teams. We were going to compete in everything, and we were going to spend time with each other, whether breaking bread, whether it was breakfast in the morning after PT, whether it was barbecues in the evening, or whether it was intentionally developing the time where you got to know each other on a professional but personal level, right? And I think as we look at like young officers coming out, that's an area that they tend to struggle with, is that balance between the how do you do that in a way that does not push you towards you know poor outcomes, poor decisions. And so that was something we spent a lot of time doing, and we took a lot of pride in it, right? And so for us, like All American Week, we were going to win All American Week. That
Yeah.
was the way we would do it. That was important, right? And if we didn't win it, we felt like we had lost. But then we felt like, hey, if we didn't win it, we're going to reset and we're going to go right back in. It was like, okay, on to the next thing, right? And
Yep.
so we were resilient in what we did. Um, my best lieutenant in 1P, I recocked 4 times on platoon live fires. And it wasn't because he was individually bad. It was just things were not quite going right, and we had a culture of accountability where we had to get it right. And he was the best lieutenant because on the highest stage where other people might break because they're feeling like they're failing, he was able to go back every time and lift his sergeants up, lift his platoon up, and stay the course as we learned and grew and got better. And then they executed through it and had the best run when it was finally done. But like they were in the wilderness for a little while there
Yeah.
trying to accomplish that. And so what made him the best wasn't because he was individually the most competent lieutenant. He was very competent. What made him the best was his ability to identify and manage the pace of the pressure and stress on the organization, and turn the rheostat up and down as it went. And so for me, it was, how do I create these experiences as a battalion commander that replicates that intentionally at every echelon for every leader in the organization? And we did the same thing in the 173rd as a DCO. We just throttled up one level, whether it was company commanders or it was the stuff we were doing with H2F, some of the things that you talked with Mike Klepper about regarding spiritual fitness, like all those things were designed to be these iterative experiences that allow you to manage the pressure rheostat when things start to get really, really hard, right? And so we took all that goodness that came out of doing battalion command and my time in the 173rd across my whole career, and we took that approach to First Brigade, right? And so whether it was my kids in the sand, my future officers that are doing Sandhurst, we just left the Sandhurst competition at West Point, and the work that they put in, they had a really great competition, but really what happened was they iteratively built a culture over time to set that team up so they could compete successfully at this high level competition. And that happened over the last year. We resourced them and intentionally created experiences that would help them grow and do that across all our programs.
Yeah.
We built out a very detailed, clear training path where it would look, it's nothing complicated. Again, none of this is like crazy stuff. It's just simplifying it down to the same things you would want a battalion, a company, a platoon to be good at. We just simplified that to ROTC and said, do those things, do them over and over and over again, and then iteratively up the rheostat and the pressure, create challenges that stress, but allow you to fall easily and recover, and continue to do that over time. And I think what we've seen in the last 2 years is just a real establishment of an identity, right? A culture that I think some organizations, some places may lack that, right? And so trying to create that for them, where they see themselves not just as VMI, but they see themselves as Spartans in the Spartan Brigade, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
when you start to see people using that language, right? and identifying themselves that way, you've sort of started to get something
Right.
that takes root. And so that's been kind of our focus, is how do we do that? And certainly I don't know that I get any of the credit for this. It's really the PMSs and the sergeants, the MSIs at our programs, our captains and our majors that, you know, they bought into the vision and they all ran with it. Like they really did. And
Yeah.
so I couldn't be prouder of the work that our great leaders, our captains and our sergeants have put into investing in our cadets. It's probably going to be the highest point of my Army career, is seeing the fact that these young leaders um, are impacting a generation in such a positive way.
Yeah.
There's this idea of third generation leadership, right? And it's not just about developing those below you. It's about equipping those below you with a leader development model that's going to iterate for the next generation beyond that, right?
Right.
And it's not just about them, it's about raising the bar of the profession as a whole. And I think that's something that the team that I've been surrounded with has been able to do pretty well.
Yeah, the way you described it, it seems that that could be applied to, again, whatever type of organization we are a part of, whether it's a brigade
Yep.
combat team, basic training brigade, a CTC and such. Can you explain for me a little bit how the Spartan Brigade is formed, and like how those, you said six universities, and because not a lot of folks know what those are.
Sure. So the Spartan Brigade is the only brigade that is not geographically aligned. So there are 8 brigades in Cadet Command. 7 of them are geographically aligned, regionally. First Brigade, the Spartan Brigade, has the 6 senior military colleges. So Texas A&M, Virginia Tech, VMI, the Citadel, Norwich University, and the University of North Georgia. And then it has our nation's 4 military junior colleges, which are extremely unique organizations that I didn't fully understand until I took this job. These 4 military junior colleges are Georgia Military College, Marion Military Institute, New Mexico Military Institute, and Valley Forge Military College. And the thing that makes those schools unique is that they are 2-year commissioning programs where you essentially come out of high school, get your associate's degree, commission before you get your bachelor's degree into the Guard or Reserve, and you go off to a 4-year university and complete your bachelor's degree whatever school you can get into. And so it's a really cool opportunity that I had no idea even existed in the Army. And they're called it's called the early commissioning program. And so I am in charge of those 10 programs. Those programs are established in Title 10 of U.S. Code and are directed by our government, by Congress, to sort of replicate some of the things that happen at our military academies. So they're directed to have a corps of cadets. They're directed to have a character development program. They're directed to have a military program that replicates the things that happen at a West Point or something like that. And so it's this unique intersection of ROTC and our nation's military academies under the auspices of the ROTC programs in terms of the training mechanism that commissions officers. And so it's a pretty unique space to be in, and one that is cool because they are our largest programs. The Citadel commissions about 120 to 130 second lieutenants a year. And every one of my senior military colleges commissions something very close to that, usually between 95 and 120 second lieutenants. And then each of my military junior colleges usually commissions somewhere between 22 and 35 second lieutenants a year. And so every year, this brigade of 10 programs delivers about 720 to 800 second lieutenants a year, depending on the needs of the Army. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's almost comparable to how many come out of West Point every year.
That's right. We commission uh, about 200 fewer than two to 300 fewer than West Point a year, depending on the attrition rates
Sure.
and whatnot. So we're only a few under. I think at our high water mark, our total enrolled in Army ROTC ends up being higher. So
Yeah.
depending upon where we are in the year, we're somewhere around 4,200 to 4,500 cadets enrolled. But obviously, people
Okay.
transfer colleges and universities, and that's one of the things that's different about ROTC. Obviously, is you can sort of pick and choose when or if you off ramp out of the program in different ways than you do sort of at the military academies.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting concept, and we often transfer kids from a regular school into some of our programs. And then sometimes we'll have kids or cadets transfer out of one of our programs into an ROTC program that's closer to home for whatever reasons.
Yeah.
For us, it's all about getting good leaders in the Army, and all of our ROTC programs produce tremendously capable officers for
How
sure.
does that compare to the regional brigades, like 6th Brigade and Southeast,
Sure,
4th
sure.
on the Northeast?
Well, I consider myself lucky because I said I only have 10 programs. And so I get to spend a lot more time with my programs than I think my peers do. Most of the other brigades have somewhere between 27 and 34 programs that they oversee. And so from a size wise, we all typically have around the same number of cadets, but
But they got more
the
campuses.
more programs. So
yeah.
That's right. And so for most of our brigade commanders, they're lucky if they are able to get to each of their programs once a year.
Yeah. If that.
And if that, it's just they're on the road constantly, and they don't get to spend as much time with them as I know all of them would like. Like I feel like I've got the best job in the Army because I get to I get to have persistent presence with my cadets, and even then I feel like I don't get enough. Right? Like I really am. I'm mostly jealous of my PMSs because they get to be like in the thick of it every day. Like that to me is where the real reward comes. I have to do a little bit more deliberate, strat comms to maintain that engagement as we go. But certainly, I think that's the main difference is just the span of control that the other brigade commanders have.
Mm-hmm.
That they certainly are challenged there. But said it's slightly different problems,
Right.
different mission sets, but all produce amazing officers.
What do you think are some of the best parts about being the professor of military science and some of the assistant professors of military science, the majors, the captains, and then some of the NCOs that are at this program? Can you talk about like how much of an impact those people are having on the cadets that are out there?
For sure. You will be remembered forever, for good or bad, as a PMS, APMS, and military science instructor at NCO serving, and the profound impact you can have personally and professionally on a young person going through college, trying to figure out what they want to be in the Army, in life, is unbelievable. And you see it in the way. My favorite thing is when you come to cadet summer training and all of our cadre from across cadet command come to Fort Knox, and we put thousands of cadets through the largest training event that happens annually in the continental United States, right? And our cadets, their eyes light up when they see their cadre out there doing their jobs as platoon trainers, company trainers, and they come up to them and they're excited to share that, hey, Sergeant, Master Sergeant, what you taught me this summer is making me successful. Like a light switch goes on, and you see that suddenly they just get it. Like, oh man, Sergeant, you taught me how to do this. You held me accountable to these standards. And now that I'm here, I see it, and I see how it makes sense. And I see how you set me up for success. And suddenly they're better, but they also now have this mental model of what leader development looks like in the Army. Like, it's just this little thin slice of how to develop leaders suddenly becomes salient to them. And then you start to see these cadets teaching peers that maybe didn't get the same development at their program, right? And so it's just this really cool thing where it just comes full circle. And these young people then go off into our Army, and they never forget that human being that invested in them for 2, 3, 4 years of their time, growing from kids in high school into young men and women that now have this awesome responsibility of leading our nation's sons and daughters in our Army. And it's so powerful. And I think a lot of times our officers and NCOs on the outside looking in get nervous about coming to ROTC. But oh my gosh, the profound impact you can have, and you will have. I don't know anyone that leaves that says, "Man, that wasn't worthwhile." Like most of my leaders that leave, like they leave begrudgingly, like they're sad, like they want to get back to the Army and do Army things again, but like they're emotionally, like it's like losing their family, right?
It's
because
the closest
these cadets,
thing to a family.
That's right. Yeah, it's like they've just lost their family. That they're like these proud parents watching their cadets go off into the Army, knowing that you've put your stamp of approval for 2, 3, 4 years on these kids, and now they're going out there and doing it. And I find that it's an immensely satisfying, professionally and personally experience that I would encourage anyone to come do. I think just from a professional development standpoint, sometimes there's weird rumors that are out there like, oh, if you come to Cadet Command, it's not good for your career. That's untrue.
Right.
I will tell you, at least from my experience in the Army writ large, performance always matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you show up and you crush it and you give it your very best, then you do the very best you can be for the organization you're in and the leaders that you're developing, whether it's in the infantry battalion or your FSC or at your Army ROTC battalion. Everyone's going to see that, and the OERs will take care of themselves, and you will end up exactly where you need to be in life and in the Army. And I've been watching it my whole time here. I've seen guys get selected for battalion command. I've watched field grades and captains go off to special missions units. I've watched NCOs immediately leave out of here and get selected to be sergeants major and first sergeants, and they're going right back to these great units. I just had a master sergeant go to RASP 2, and he's now going back to 275. I mean, the talent we have is tremendous, and it will always rise to the top. And I will tell you that our cadets need the great talent that our Army has, for sure.
Yeah, the part about being like a family that is so impactful and so rewarding while you're out at ROTC, from my experiences, both going through it and then watching it, from my time with 4th Brigade, is that, like a parent, you're helping your kids get their education. They're still developing. Some of them are 18 to 20 years old, right? They're starting to mature. Yeah. It's the first time they've ever been away from their mom and dad and maybe on their own. And so now they're looking at you like their big brother, or in some cases their mom, their dad or their mom that's out there that's helping them with their education, helping them be mature, helping them figure out what they want to do with their life, right? What branch are you going to go to? What post do I want to ask for? And so these conversations, when they ask for 30 minutes for your advice on those things, like that's going to impact the rest of their life. And when you invest in that, I feel like it translates so well back out to the operational Army. So whenever I see somebody, and whether it's I look at their ORB or they tell me in initial counseling, I was like, what did you do? Well, I was an assistant professor of military science, or I was a, military science instructor as an NCO. It's like being a drill sergeant. It just immediately in my head, I know what they learned about raising these kids into soon to be adults and leaders, and how you don't have hundreds of people on your left and right. You're having to coach them through PT. You're having to coach them through showing up. You're having to coach them through getting ready for summer camp, right? And then that's why it's so emotional when it's time for the cadets to move on and graduate and go out. I often say there's three things that every ROTC cadet remembers. They absolutely remember Ranger Challenge and how that was important at some point in their time. They absolutely can tell you their PMS and their senior military instructors by name, like their drill sergeants, right? They could tell them by name, and they will remember CST. They remember going to advanced camp and the overwhelming emotions that come with summer training. Can you talk about summer training a little bit? And one, because you were the commandant. Sure. But I think you're going to be it again this year, right? Going into it, maybe.
We'll see. It's up or down. I will be involved in cadet summer training, whether I'm the commandant or the deputy. One of those two things will happen. But I'll certainly be involved in CST, and it's designed to be a crucible experience for our cadets, and they need that. We talk about doing hard things, and that's what the Army is, right? It is doing hard things and learning how to lead through that. And so I would offer that CST is sort of a two-part process. One, it's a standards-based training event, right, where you come in and you are assessed against about 6 different things. One is your conditioning, your physical fitness. 2 is your ability to demonstrate leadership through small unit orders, small unit tactics, mission orders, troop leading procedures, and then your ability to demonstrate competence in military skills through marksmanship, land navigation, and then our warrior skills. Essentially E3B tasks, for lack of a better term. And so when we bring the cadets in from across the Army, the best thing, hands down, is we put them in this sort of melting pot of humans that they've never met before. So you're not there with all your guys from VMI. You're there with folks from University of California, Santa Barbara, Appalachian State, UF, and then Cornell. And they're all in this big melting pot, and they've all come from a different background and experience. If you're a cadet coming from City College of New York, you've had a wildly different ROTC experience than the cadet coming from the Citadel, for sure. But we all have to lead together. And so we put them in these units and we give them leadership roles and responsibilities. And over the course of about, a month or so, we put them through these iterative experiences that elevates the rheostat, forcing them to demonstrate leadership in increasingly high pressure, complicated situations, that really kind of cap out at the platoon tactical level on the back end with, platoon small unit tactics as the anchor point. But I think everyone throughout, it's really a feedback based event. And so as you go throughout, it's constant and iterative feedback. And if you listen to the feedback and you apply it, you'll see this growth happen over the course of your month experience here, where coming out the back end, you are a better cadet, but most importantly, you're a more prepared future officer. That if I had to move you into a platoon right now, you're probably pretty close to being ready coming out of that event. And I think it's a tremendous event. It takes an all compo effort to put it together, as we bring in active component, guard, and reserve. Our force comm soldiers we have rotating force comm units that come in and help train these kids. We have our reservists, our guard support. It's just a all compo, all hands on deck effort. And I think we see a tremendous outcome on the back end for sure.
Yeah. It's so impactful, like just, bringing everybody together. It's kind of like when you show up at Ranger School and you get all these people coming from across the whole Army. In the advanced camp way, it's people coming from all across the world, for that matter,
Yep.
and all across the United States, from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different types of families, some prior service folks and some first time serving. That are out there. I'll never forget the experience, both going through it and then also as a cadre member, being out there.
Oh, for it is. It's a great. I mean, for our cadre in particular, we talk a lot about the development that happens to our cadets. Uh, I think the event also makes our cadre better trainers, right? Better leaders in their formations. Because if you're a cadre member going through as a platoon training officer, you are switched on for about 40 straight days. Like you are switched on, and every minute of every hour is consumed planning, preparing, executing, and assessing the thing that you're doing, and then the next thing and the next thing, and it just sort of feels like this nonstop blur. But you come out of it better prepared to then train and educate your cadets back at the program. And so
Yeah.
for me, CST is such a developmental experience, not just for our cadets, but our
Right.
cadre get better for it. Our rotating force comm units that come through, whenever I talk to those units that come through, I always emphasize to them, like, you have no idea the impact our cadets have get from interacting with our Army, like seeing a sergeant or a specialist in charge of a convoy and running that professionally, and doing that in a way where they're applying the doctrine that these cadets are applying here at CST. They see that and they're like, oh, okay, it just creates a connection to what they're about to do. And they get to spend time talking to these soldiers and talking to these NCOs. And it's hugely powerful, hugely impactful. And I think across the board, it's a tremendous developmental experience for our cadets and our cadre for sure.
Yeah, we've been dabbling for about 30 minutes now, talking about, all the things that come from whether you're serving in cadet command as a cadet, or you're serving there as a NCO or an officer. I want to talk a little bit about all these benefits that come with being a part of cadet command and being a part of ROTC, outside of just, I'm going to go get an ROTC scholarship because it's a way to pay for college.
Sure.
And then I'm going to go do 3 to 5 years in the Army. And then I'm going to figure out what I want to do with my life. Right. There's so much things that come from this experience that if you show up to a university, whether you're getting a scholarship to go to ROTC or not, there's so many things that come with it besides just a scholarship. And there's a lot of people that think that's the only reason to do it, or that's out there.
Right.
What do you think that some of those things that we've been talking about highlight were the biggest things that come from your experience at ROTC?
Sure. I think the growth you see, the maturity, you will mature faster in life going through Army ROTC's program. Going through any commissioning program will force you to mature as an adult into a young professional in a way that I think that is just outside the norm of what you would get if you're just a normal college student. You're a normal college student, you're worried about classes and what you're going to do on the weekend. You maybe get a side job. Those are all great and developmental experiences. But when you put yourself in this iterative process where you're consistently pushing yourself to be a little bit better, you are putting yourself in experiences where you're a little bit uncomfortable, but there's an appropriate safety net where failure is okay. You can get caught, and then you can recover and continue to progress. When you come out the back end of that experience, your ability, whether you serve no days in the Army or you serve for 30 or more years in the Army, your ability to provide leadership, deal with adversity, and collaborate with people is, I feel, exponentially greater than any sort of developmental program you'll see in other places, at other universities. It's just a different thing because you're forced to apply it. Like, it's all application based learning, right? And it's experiential learning, and it's iterative over time. And when you go through that, you can't help but be a different type of leader.
Mm-hmm.
That will be successful in life. Doesn't matter if you're in the Army or out of it. You're going to be a better citizen. You're going to be a better organizational leader in whatever type of organization you're in. And I think another thing that's pretty great about it, that I love personally, is you can now tell the story of our Army, and that's pretty powerful, right? We have a branding problem in the Army, right? And there's a large portion of our nation that doesn't understand who we are and our history and our legacy, and why we are a citizen of all volunteer force that's representative of our nation, and why it's important. You going through Army ROTC, you get to experience that. And again, whether you serve no days or 30 years, you now are the author of our Army's future story. You get to communicate that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's powerful. That's hugely powerful, and something that I think that people often lose sight of. I think when the Army, you know, I think, well, you soldier for life was something that I always thought was a cool term. And then Fort Bragg said, no, you're a paratrooper for life, which I liked even better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But reality is that idea is amazing, right? Again, like, whether you serve for one tour or your whole tour, your ability to tell the Army story to our nation is needed now more than ever, because we have no idea what the future holds, right? We have no idea what the future holds, but one day our Army is going to get called on to do something, and our nation needs to understand why it's important.
Yeah.
So,
And I think whether you do, 2 or 3 years, you do 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is that you do, you're a part of this tribe. You're a part of this group of people that you will forever have
yep,
those friends, the friends that you went through basic with, the friends that you went to advanced camp
yep,
with, the friends and the people, the relationships, the mentors, the coaches that you developed through all those years, and you start building out your board of directors. So when you go off and whatever it is you do, you can always kind of rely back on them. But then you become that person where whatever town you go back to your hometown, you go to a new town, you go to a
yep,
family cookout, you go to a family reunion, and they're like, "Hey, my nephews are considering the Army. Who do they go? Go ask Uncle Jason. Like he has
that's right.
spent a couple days in the Army. He knows what it is."
Yep,
Or he can put you in touch with somebody closer in age to you, and he can put you in touch with somebody that's been an engineer, that's been an aviator, that was
yep,
enlisted, that was an officer, that was a sergeant major. I'm considering to go do this MOS, right? I'm thinking about
yep.
this specialty. I'm thinking about cyber. I'm thinking about electronic warfare. Hey, I know somebody. I'll put you in touch with that person, and then they can learn. They can learn from it.
100%. I think, you mentioned like family, right? I think one of the things that it's a lot of fun in my job is I get to talk to the family members who are often way more anxious about their son or daughter going through this military experience. Like, there's this level of pride, but there's also this anxiety. And when we who are in the Army can reinforce and build trust with family members that are giving you their most precious human being to train, develop, and lead, again, that is one of those things where they will they will sell that story, and they will connect other people to the Army in positive ways. And I've seen it so many times. I mean, it happened this weekend up at West Point, like at Sandhurst. I had one of my classmates whose son is on the Texas A&M Sandhurst team, connected me with a friend of hers whose daughter is thinking about going to Texas A&M Army ROTC. And I talked with the future cadet, but really I was talking to mom.
Yeah.
Like I was having, let's talk about this thing and help it make sense, and what it is we're doing and why we're doing it, and what this journey to be an Army officer looks like. And that, oh man, that's like the best part of my job, is watching mom
Right.
and
Right.
dad sort of
Their
see
eyes
that.
light
And
up when they see
yep,
the possibility.
that's right. And that's what you're giving them, a possibility that they otherwise had no idea. They couldn't connect the dots to it. And so you're creating this connection that is that's unbelievable. And that's just going to continue to feed. Like it's just you're going to build this unstoppable momentum for our Army and for these young people. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I think, and I'd love to hear your side, as a dad now, like you have a family that is,
Yep.
getting ready to make some of these decisions. And I've now lived through this a couple times, right? When my son said, I'm going to enlist in the Army and I'm going to go out to the Army, like me and Christy's, like our hearts just got a little bit warmer because we knew
Yep.
what he was getting himself into. We knew
Yep.
that he was going to go out there and people were going to take care of him. They were going to be hard on him when it was time to be hard. They were going to hold him accountable when he needed to be held accountable, but they were going to take care of him when it was time to deploy. And he's on his second
Yep.
deployment now. He just found out this week that he's going to 4th RTB. He's PCSing as soon as he gets back from this deployment to 4th RTB, back to Fort Benning. He's going to go there. So he's all fired up, and I'm fired up
Yep.
for him. Right. And then
Yep.
when Ryan decided she was going to go to West Point, she got in, she's like, I'm going to go to West Point. Again, we just knew she was going to be surrounded by people that we wanted, that we were, we knew she was going to be surrounded by the right people,
Right.
going forward. And we were so happy for her. And all
Yep.
the anxiety kind of went away
Yep.
for me, it went away.
For sure. I would say that, I've got one daughter who is she's a sophomore engineering student at Purdue, and she is going to serve in one way. I know for a fact this young lady is going to serve in one way or the other, whether it's in the Army or out. She's going to serve our nation. Like, she's passionate about it, and I couldn't be happier for her decisions that are going to take her there. I don't know what's going to happen with my twins. Connor and Kelsey are very much still freshmen in high school, and it feels like it's a changing narrative every week of what they want to be when they grow up. But I can tell you that Carrie and I would feel a lot the same way you and Christy do. Is if any of our kids choose to serve, I am we would feel pride. We'd feel anxiety, sure. Like, it's scary watching your kids grow up and go do things. But I think you can say the same thing with anything when your kids leave the house and the protective bubble you've sort of put around them. I think every parent goes through that level of anxiety. But knowing, to your point, that you have a strong values-based organization filled with people that you know and trust that are going to take care of them, it's pretty great. I mean, we and that's been a good. I mean, I see it all the time with my friends and their kids that are at West Point, that are at VMI and the Citadel. Like, I get the chance in my job to go see them and check on them, and then take a picture and send a note to their mom and dad and say, "Hey, Zach's doing great. He's killing it.
Yeah.
Jackson is smashing it up at Norwich. He's doing an amazing job. You should be so proud." And you just get this. You just know that someone is ensuring that your son or daughter is being taken care of. And I think that's the Army, right? Like, when we really think about it, right? In no other profession out there are you responsible for your people outside of work. Like, there's no other profession out there where I have to worry about what's going on in my people's lives. I mean, our best leaders do, right, in other places, but it's not a requirement. It's a fundamental aspect of leading in our Army, is that, you're looking out for your team on and off duty. You're looking out for your extended families on and off duty. And I think that's the thing why people stay in the Army. Like when we say it's about the people, it's always about the people. Everything's about the people, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's what makes the Army such a powerful profession, is that our people, we become so tied to them for years, for generations. Like it's a generational experience. You start in the Army with, I've got specialists that I started in the Army with that are now sergeants major, right?
Yeah.
And I watch their kids. I watch their kids growing up, right? And so it's this generational experience that binds you together. That is just makes this the greatest profession on earth for sure.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Obviously, because I've lived through it so much going forward for me, for my family, and now I'm just trying to share it with as many people as I possibly can. About the benefits that come with serving. You've had a couple of special opportunities that you've also got to do recently. VMI's Cameron Patrol experience. There were some things that
Yep.
you guys have got to do outside of the continental United States, and you now went to Sandhurst just this week, right? You're doing these different competitions. A lot of your cadets are going to go to CTLT over the summer, and they're going to move out and go visit organizations and units and before they head off to do it. And then other international experiences that they have, before they commission. What are some of those? What are the benefits of some of those special opportunities
Sure.
that you guys get to do?
Sure. The Cambria Patrol was a cool opportunity, and VMI was the first ROTC program to do it this last year, and VMI and Texas A&M are going to do it. They just completed registration, and they're going to do it again in the fall. So we'll send two teams this fall to Wales to do what is arguably the hardest patrol exercise in the world. It is an intense military skills based patrol that about 25 to 30% of the patrols don't finish it, and about 60 to 70% don't even earn a placing. They just complete it. They don't qualify for a medal. And it was pretty awesome in our first go through last year. VMI managed to secure a bronze placement on
Wow.
their first try as an ROTC team. Considering most armies regular squads that go through often don't complete it and most don't medal, that was a pretty point of pride for us as an organization that we were able to prepare them and do that. But to your point about like why those things are important, you know, one, it's really important to us in First Brigade that we create experiences for our cadets that show them that they can keep up with the very best in the world. Like it's important for them to see that being in the Army isn't this far off thing that they're not ready for. It's this thing where if you just prepare and you do the right things every day, we can put you in these situations and you can keep up with the very best units in the Army. And so we've made a point of competing at the national and international level for the last 2 years, whether it's the U.S. Army marksmanship competition down at Fort Benning, whether it's the best sapper competition. We sent 3 teams last year to the best sapper competition, whether it is the Lacerda Cup, whether it is the Baton Death March, all these different things that are out there. It's crazy experiences where they can see how the Army works. They can be exposed to the great leaders, NCOs, officers, and soldiers that we have. And they can see that it's not this scary thing that's way off in the future. It's something that's accessible right now. And they can connect the dots between what they're learning in Army ROTC and see that it's relevant. It's not some like weird thing that they're just doing in ROTC. It's no, this applies. It applies right now, and they can demonstrate that. And it also brings pride, like we said, competitions and cookouts, right?
Hmm.
So like let's do that. Let's do that in everything we do. And it permeates because when you start doing that with these specialized teams, then you start seeing these things take place in the whole ROTC program. And then the things that like you and I grew up with in a 173rd or a 75th Ranger Regiment, where once a month you had a platoon competition,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone, like, somebody got the trophy, whether it was a paddle or a wrestling belt or whatever your trophy was. Your rescue Randy, that was all, that was
Yeah.
a platoon trophy. Like, those things become points of pride and culture, and you raise the bar of the whole organization. Those training events were designed to do that. We greatly expanded opportunities for cadets to go out to CTLT. So we re-tailored our operations budget to expose our cadets, give cadets more opportunities to see the Army and spend time with our lieutenants and our sergeants and go do those things. And it's hugely powerful when they come back and they're like, oh, okay, what you're teaching me here is exactly, it just makes sense. I'll never forget, as a cadet, I knew, I always thought I was going to go infantry, but I knew I was going to go infantry when I came back from CTLT, because
Mm-hmm.
I went to Fort Campbell. I went to Fort Campbell. In fact, I went to the same battalion that I ultimately ended up in as a lieutenant. And I showed up. They handed me a rucksack, and I went to the field for 28 days for a Eagle Flight 3 Brigade FTX, right? And it was the best thing ever. It was awesome. And I came back like, let's go. The things you're teaching me make sense. They apply. And I am ready to be an infantry officer, because that's all I want to do in my life. And I'm hopeful that the work we put into exposing our cadets to our Army through things like CTLT, through internships and things like that, through these tailored competitions and things, like when we send our cadets to 10th Mountain Division to do the D Series competition. I'm hopeful they come back and they're like, I get it. And I'm fired up to go join that organization.
Yeah. The last couple things I wanted to, one, I wanted to, if there's something that I have failed to ask the right question or kind of get us talking about, I want to make sure I get an opportunity to talk about that. But what I wanted you to kind of, as we wrap things up a little bit here, is a category about, your advice for folks that are in, active units that are about to get these cadets, whether it be for CTLT this summer, or they're going to get them, they're going to come out to their units. They're going to come from ROTC and they're going to come back out to the operational force. And the folks that are out there, like me, that are out here, that are getting ready to have them join the team going forward. What advice do you have for us that are out here, going through the transition and contact, going on operation pathways, going to deployments to Europe right now, that are taking these folks that you've been working with for the last couple of years to be a part of our team?
For sure. On the CTLT side with the cadets, I'm really fortunate that the great part about being a brigade commander is almost all the brigade commanders, right?
Yeah.
And so when our cadets are going out, I get a chance to call them and talk to them, and say, hey, I get the chance to tailor it. And the thing I always tell units that are getting our CTLT cadets is, don't baby them and give them this like sort of smorgasbord experience. Put them in the thick of it. Like they're ready. They're ready, and they need to see it. They need to see what our Army is all about. And so put them into hard experiences, give them hard experiences. If you're going to the field, put them into the field and give them a hard job. They're ready, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how these cadets switch it on and rise to the challenge, right? And if they don't, give them real honest feedback. Like, give them real honest feedback of where they're coming up short. Because the reality is, for most of these cadets coming off CTLT, they only have about a year and a half left before they are going to commission. And so if there's some gaps, we want to shore that up. And I would ask you to do that. For our officers that are coming out to the force, I would say the same thing. Like they're ready. They're ready, and they will meet our expectations and go beyond. Give them hard jobs, let them fight through it and intentionally develop them. I think that's an area that, as I grew up in the Army, it was something I started spending more and more time on, was creating intentional developmental experiences for each of my lieutenants and my captains. And it's nothing that any brigade commander doesn't already know it. Most of us are already doing these things. And so none of this sounds like it's new, but I think that's the thing that I get most often when I talk to cadets and lieutenants is they crave feedback and development, right? And so they want to feel like someone's got their hand on the tiller as they're guiding them in their career. And a lot of times things are happening that they have no idea are intentional. And so I think creating those intentional feedback loops and challenges for our officers is always going to be that's the thing that keeps me up at night as a brigade commander. And I think it's the thing that keeps most brigade commanders up at night as they think through how to do that intentionally across a large organization, right? So I don't know if that's useful or not, but I think that's sort of the way I think about it.
It's definitely useful. It's useful for me too. Like I'm out here guiding these battalions and brigades through, JPMRC and the Army's newest combat training center out here in the Pacific. And so everything, I'm soaking it all up about what's coming out here. We're going to get some CTLT cadets that are going to come out here and be a part of JPMRC as well and see what the newest Army's combat training center is all about. And so I plan on not making it easy on them and putting them on some tough work. And some of these schools are doing great work for what we're trying, some of the initiatives that we are trying to push forward.
As you think about you guys have the most unique opportunity, especially with transition and contact, as we think about the various domains and the integration. I think that's one area where we as in ROTC are not resourced for to expose them to. And so the more they can see that sort of thing, they can see how the electromagnetic spectrum impacts what we're doing. We can see the integration of cyber and space in real time at the squad and platoon level, and they can connect the dots there. I think that's an area that I wish we were resourced to do more in Army ROTC, and a gap that when we send them out to you guys, the more they can see some of that stuff, will be very helpful for them to see where the Army's going. From a long-term perspective.
Yeah, between us and the 25th Infantry Division here, they'll definitely get a chance to see the newest of the new on what we're doing, because the soldiers from the bottom up are practicing with things, trying out new stuff, figuring out what's working and what doesn't. They got the newest tech, they got the coolest ideas, and they're thinking of different ways to try to solve these problems.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm super thankful for you to spend some time with me today to share some of these things with me. I look forward to future conversations, between us, messages back and forth. I'm really looking forward to the feedback I get from folks once they hear this conversation and the things, and hopefully they'll reach out to you with some more questions like, hey, what did you mean by this? What did you mean by that? So I'm super thankful, brother, for you to spend so much time with me today.
No, man, I appreciate it, man. It was a great way to spend an afternoon. I guess we've been going for about 2 hours now. So, pretty awesome. Time just flew by. I'm hopeful this was good. Certainly out of my comfort zone. I've never done a podcast before, so I have no idea how this will come out. But if there's a guy that'll polish this up for me, it's going to be you. So thank you for the opportunity, Matt. This is great.
Yeah, well, I won't have to do much polishing. I promise that. The folks will let us know what they're thinking, especially if they're if it gets to the point where they're at this point in the conversation, they're invested. They know you, they know me. They wanted to hear everything that you had to say. But the way that you've been leading for so many years, that's the impact that people are going to really remember. They're going to remember the way you made them feel throughout your career. They're going to remember the things that you did for their family. Those families out there that have kids that have served with you, they're going to remember the way they felt they trusted you going out there. So I appreciate it again. I appreciate it going forward because I know that this isn't the end of your some way, shape, or form serving the Army, serving people, and serving families.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. If you need anything from me, man, you know where to find me for sure.
Have a great afternoon.
Be good, man.
Bye. Thanks for listening today. I hope we sparked some thoughts about the people that have inspired you to be who you are today. I hope you share some of your thoughts and better yet, demonstrate them for the people in your life. Our pursuit is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories stacked on top of each other, building like compound interest. Keep stacking these positive habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. Please share your comments at the links in the show notes and DM us at Teach Me to Fish podcast on Instagram or Facebook. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky in your mind.